Welcome once again to the Friday's Smart Keyword Musings, which is a gentle flurry of interesting thoughts. And today's musing was actually triggered by a conversation that I had with a colleague of mine a couple of weeks ago. And the conversation was about speed. And then that led to a discussion into saying, hey, what does speed or what does being rapid mean in this age of AI, where tools seem to co-work with you? And that's led to an interesting set of thoughts, which is what I hope to share and muse about today. So in the context of quality assurance, if you largely look and ask very broadly, what are the kinds of work that we do? What types of work do we do? I'm sure there are very many. Some of them maybe look like this. We do work which relates to understanding intents, expectations. Some of them relate to explorations and planning. Some relate to probably the act of design, whatever it is, design of tests and design of code and design of observability, testability. Obviously code and execute at some point. Observations, recording of issues, bugs, ideas, thoughts. Of course, analyzing outcomes, analyzing situations, and finally, of course, managing, right? And maybe there are a few more, but I think you get the gist. So when we look at these various kinds of work and we want to be more efficient, we want to do more, we want to accomplish more, etc., what we are focused more often is, what can I do? What can we do rapidly? And more often than not, certain of those highlighted ones, as you can see in the left, that is the execute, the analyze, the manage, seems to pop out. Because maybe there are tools to help me do this job. Maybe there is a technology aid. And therefore, I see that those kinds of work as possibly meaningful candidates that I can, look at to do rapidly. Which is absolutely fair, and I think that's how we've evolved over many years in not just our assurance discipline, across very many disciplines. Let's shift over a bit and then ask, what do these involve? Behind the scenes stuff, right? It's not just the physical act of doing something. It probably, as we all know, every activity that we do, whether in assurance or otherwise, involves, looking at the larger picture. Some reconnaissance, some surveying, some looking at various pieces and analyzing, maybe putting some potential stuff in the context of, let's say, hypotheses. Maybe looking at various pieces of elements and connecting together, maybe some synthesis. Maybe asking what if situation, creating certain counterfactual situations, the bunch of what ifs. Obviously some experimentation, trying out, succeeding, failing, in the process, observing. So a lot of these are probably what you might classify as cognitive, intellectual kind of activities, which we know today and which as mature testers, we appreciate a lot more today, which is more often invisible, right? Which is something that you can't really surface because they are not evident in some of the artifacts that we produce. But then the question is, the same question I'm going to ask, can we do these rapidly? So it seems like I'm trying to move from the notion there were a set of activities that we were doing which seemed a little physical in nature. And these probably involve some activities which are probably cognitive, intellectual in nature. And we're trying to ask the same question. Hey, what can we do physically? What can be speeded up in the context of activities that are physical? And is there any of these activities that are intellectual or cognitive that we can do rapidly? That's the question that we're asking. Now, why are we asking this question in the cognitive sense? Because it seems that we have now recourse to something which is intelligent and which we call as AI, right? In whatever form or fashion. Something that allows us to exploit, allows us to co-work rather than just be commanded to do work. And that's, I think, the shift that we probably in each one of us in various ways are experiencing in various forms. And therefore, the notion of rapidity probably is shifting. It's migrating. And we're not even watching. There is quietly shifted in terms of saying, look, it's not about just the physical activity, how fast we produce. Maybe it's not that alone. Maybe it is about how soon we reach clarity, because we understand, as in terms of assurance, all we're trying to do is to seek certain clarity, and in the process of seeking certain clarity to understand what is intended, we hopefully find potential anomalies, offer some suggestions, make some observations, and so on. So it is no more about just minimally about tasks and cycles, but it's really about how quickly can I get to the proximity to the outcome. So there are two shifts that's probably happening. One is the speed of doing to the speed of the doing of the activity to how fast we can quickly get to the notion of the outcome or clarity, proximity, and so on. And that's really what it is. So somewhere in this entire notion, I keep kind of, in my head, it spins that maybe rapid migrated when we were in watching. It's like a quiet shift, because we were measuring things by how fast the doing happened. But now it seems like it is more like the distance between the question and the insight, how rapidly we can cover that. So is it really about execution only? Maybe not. It is about the speed at which we get the proximity to possibly the truth. Right? Now, with all the wonderful technology that we've all been having over the years, we've always, done things faster. Right? But now with the additional technology, which certainly there are a lot of things that we are able to do things faster. We can generate stuff. We can rapidly execute stuff. We can rapidly connect pieces and analyze. So some of those activities which we talked about was possibly not only limited to doing, but also the cognitive, also seem to be much faster today. So we're able to generate more volume. We are able to, and therefore, sense better, frame potential risks or hypothesize about situations and be able to examine them. So it seems like today that we have an opportunity where we can make the entire notion of execution of the entire facet far more abundant. Right? The intellectual work of framing, sensing, understanding is moving from obviously execution to a more reflective cognitive space, and all these are apparently faster. I use the word apparently because it is not that we are giving away the entire activity to some machine and say, why don't you think? No, we are changing, and we are probably working in a fashion where we exploit. So if I take some of those intellectual activities that we put up in that big circle, and let's say we look at some of the activities which are more like, hey, what ifs? Some of the activities which are various simulations. Before we kind of go through the act of doing or checking or stuff like that, right? So we are involved in probably a lot more what ifs. Now the question is, can I do these what ifs more rapidly? Can I therefore understand better? Can I get more closer to the end and proximity? Let's look at this from a slightly different angle. Let's move to a more simpler physical world, the crash test. I'm sure you all know that today equipments, cars, planes, any of these expensive equipment, not necessarily limited to expensive equipment, do undergo validation. So you want to know, if I build a car, will it function well when I go at a certain speed over in a certain terrain? So people do crash testing, right? It's part of the safety, for example. How did we do this earlier? We built a car, it took many months, and then we physically crashed the car. And then we put a lot of sensors in it, and we learned, okay, so when at this speed, at this impact, this is what happens. And then we learned from that. It's an expensive one. and then we want to try out, you want to try out a slightly variant scenario, we need another physical car. Expensive, right? Which is probably what we could do probably a few decades ago. Now what do we do now? Today you have companies and softwares which allow you to do in silico, inside the computer, right? They construct a digital model, so which means they model the entire car, the physics of the car, the material properties, the motion, the surface, the environment, the whole 9 yards. And then using this digital model, you are able to do a variety of different simulations from different speeds, different angles, different what ifs, different conditions. So what have we done? And every destruction of the car is just a digital model. So we don't have to. So I can bring up a newer car with changes and continue this experiment, continue this simulation reasonably quickly. All it requires is only compute power at the best. We don't need a physical car. So we actually became terribly rapid. But rapid what? Rapid simulations, rapid what ifs. Because we were able to model, adjust, remodel, adjust. And this definitely changed the way we learned what we did in terms of, this material is unsuitable for this. Or this particular way of joining certain pieces don't work, right? Or this is not suitable for a certain kind of terrain, and so on and so forth, right? So I want to bring about the point that, when we moved from a physical world to an in silico world in this kind of a stuff, what we were actually doing, we may not say artificial intelligence here by any stretch, but what we really did was we were able to construct a good mental model and just put that in place and then be able to exercise it many, many times and therefore do a far better design, construction, validation and deliver great products, which now today is de facto. Right. So I worked with a couple of these companies as part of their process and practice improvement in their teams, and that's when I learned as to what they do, and it's pretty amazing, simply because it's not just the physics. All the guys are all physics guys, and there are one set of guys who are serious compute guys because it requires enormous amount of horsepower and therefore fantastic algorithms to make this possible and so on. So it's really high performance computing applied in a real world model, and I'm sure there are far more interesting examples. So I just wanted to bring this entire parallel that in the world of mechanical world, maybe these have become de facto, and I'm sure we can relate it to a variety of different stuffs, right? The making of hardware, the making of chips, making of any of these are all probably done with simulations. We are not able to build any of those and experiment. So you're able to do electronic design, mechanical design. A lot of these designs today and construction all the way today is available today, right? And they've integrated with PLM models and so on and so forth. So I just want to bring about this point and say, look, that's where that world is. Maybe that's where we are going to also. And why were they able to do that? Because they speeded it up very differently. Now let's go and look at it from a slightly different perspective and add to some of those activities like explorations and modeling, some of which we saw earlier, right? And what happened? When we probably had, sorry, I think it's the wrong picture. It's here. Sorry. When we looked at explorations, right? When we wanted to be rapid, one of the constraints that we always had was, don't do too many things because we don't have time. I can't do a lot of these things. So maybe we were, in some sense, some of us were constrained because we could not try out a lot of these explorations. We could not try out what of these various what-ifs or various situations. Now, maybe I have the ability for me to explore. When I say explore, I'm not only meaning physical exploration, right? You can also hypothesize about situations. You can say what if. You can ask what could be done, how will it behave, And therefore, these possibly are opportunities for me to run certain interesting mental explorations, run some mental models, maybe in some of them run physical experiments to validate either ways, and then of course go through a process of evaluation. So now, to me, it's like saying, hey, the exploration seems a little more free, so I can apparently do a lot more, right? And I don't have to be restrictive in terms of what I select or what I should select or not select. But truly I can have a much more creative exploration mindset, because maybe I can run these situations, I can explore digitally. Maybe because I have an access to an intelligent system. Of course, the intelligent system needs to know some portions of the context, which is our responsibility to, communicate, teach it, etc. So to me, I have now enormous amount of freedom to explore. I have the ability to do a lot more simulations and experiments. I can try out various what-if simulations that is up there, and that changes the way we look at ourselves in terms of, is it an activity or is it about goal? So a fundamental shift now is a relationship, right? So in the previous world, maybe I had a tool. It was my slave. I use it. I command it. I get things done. Now, maybe the tools have been endowed with some intelligence. You can call it AI if you like. So should I apply my same yardstick? Should I command it? Should I tell it clearly what I should do? Or I should change my relationship into more of a partnership mode of, I discover along with you as a co-working partner. Right. So just branding it as AI as a tool maybe is limited, because if I told here is a tool, I would still consider myself as the master and it's the slave, which is pretty normal, and I would exactly do. But now I maybe have to diverge, maybe have to shift, because it is in a bit a co-working partner with me, and therefore I need to shift my working mode from not tell you everything what to do, but more importantly express my intent. So, say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to examine, what do you think? Which I'm sure we all do. The mode is different now, right? We are moving from a mode of command to a mode of collaboration, right? Because when you're in command, you seem to think a little bit of a closed one. I know, kind of do. But here, you're being more open. You express your intent. You're given certain approximations. And you say, I don't know, let's figure it out and let's co-work, right? So, in a way, the former, the command mode, is more like it's focused on getting you a result. It gives you a result. Whereas the latter, the collaboration mode, is probably one which gives you a perspective. It helps you form perspectives and revise. It does not let you lose control. It certainly is a fact where I am co-creating with something else, right? In this case, maybe part of AI. So we talked about simulations, what-ifs, explorations, and add to it some bit of experimentation, right? Continuing on the same thread of thought, when we had rapid, we said, look, don't do too many things, because we don't have too much time. To a large degree earlier, rapid may have meant we compress our thinking because we had to do something, we had to hurry up. So we could, in some sense, maybe limited by the amount of what-ifs, because they were physical in nature, maybe. And we probably, therefore, couldn't or may have been constrained into how much of exploration. But now, maybe that is free. When I say free, I'm meaning it's more possible. So the rapid is flipped. It's no longer about compressing the thought. It is about using the saved time, meaning, ability to explore, because I'm co-working with the chap. We aren't rushing to a finish line. In a way, it's like saying I'm widening the path to get there, right? We're not like running across the piece. So there's a bit of an inversion thought process. We are actually doing more, but doing more what? Not the physical activities. A lot more cognitive pieces, which allows me to expand, which allows me to broaden the perspective, which allows me to run more, dig a little more deeper, go a little more farther, and so on and so forth. And that's gives me a tremendous amount of exploration freedom. So, and that can happen only if I am less pointed about the whole piece. And that can happen only if I have a certain degree of time boxing. Because quite naturally, exploration is absolute freedom. So I can go off on different paths of thinking. Right? I can test multiple, maybe 5 different framings of a problem at once. We can follow our curiosity, because if we make some mistakes, the cost of being curious and making a mistake or not accomplishing something may not be too much. It may be just a few minutes. We can hold multiple contradictory perspectives in our heads without needing them to resolve them immediately. We can, in a way, sense the shape of the risk maybe much earlier than we did before, because all these are simply possible, or may be possible, because I have recourse to an intelligence which I can co-work and exploit, right? And that's a shift. And so the rapid is not about the notion of speed alone, right? Anymore, the speed of the doing. And therefore there is a continuous slow shift. The shift of, in earlier days I would be careful because the volume of work decided how much I can do. So one of the things I have to be very careful of is how much a volume of work. So I had to plan, I had to select, I had to figure out quite a few things, and I have to narrow it down so that I can say, okay, I can only do so much, and therefore I will do careful selection, right? So, but now we can allow to wander a little more. Maybe in a way, we can even crudely call it wasting time exploration. But you know why? Because what it seems an apparent waste of explorations is actually rich exploration. And therefore you learn, you understand, you sharpen, you adjust. And therefore we probably save a lot more time in the actual context of execution, if you will, right? So the notion of time is different at this point in time. So it's not about constraint, it's about freedom, it's about richness in what I do. It's about not limiting myself, which I can possibly do in the entire facet of my journey or whatever I do, right? And therefore, there is a shift in terms of how I select to explore, how a lot more work has moved from a bit of visible and being able to accomplish what we considered previously as invisible work, right? There is no need for, or may not be limited by, a linear notion of a plan. We can spin off 5 different things and experiment with 3 different things at the same time and then converge. So it's a bit of a parallelism rather than from the sequential linearism that we used to do. It requires probably a different kind of bravery for sure. Why? Because it requires us to be more comfortable with ambiguity. Because we are kind of chugging along with the recourse with these tools, maybe faster, going deeper, going broader, finding things more ambiguous and feeling still comfortable and continuing to chug along rather than saying, I need to clarify it instantly. But eventually I do obviously get to the proximity of the end, the clarity. But that's a shift. It requires probably a different kind of a bravery. So all we are trying to connect is there is probably a lot of these invisible, hidden, cognitive, intellectual activities which we all do. And maybe there is an opportunity for us in this age to be able to be assisted by some of these tools in a meaningful fashion, in a co-working form, so that I can simulate more situations, I can explore more what ifs, I can get a little more sensing. I can do, very interesting synthesis of very varied pieces of stuff. I can analyze existing stuff in much more deeper, and so on and so forth, right? And that's the shift. So the way we work, I guess it's not just me anymore, right? It's a team now, not just in terms of physical people. It's about with the machine itself, right? And that's what I'm trying to kind of push down as a picture by saying, look, it's like an interesting team, and the working is different. It's no more anymore about instructing a machine. It is about expressing an intent, a change in our posture. It's leading with an intent rather than let's say a checklist. It is about letting go of my control and say, I know I can create over the how, and trusting a better what will emerge with a dialogue with you. It's no more about, me as a solo guy, right? I can possibly benefit if I'm in a duet with you. And that's the way I think we are trying to get more faster in any of those phases of activities that we started off with, via those invisible activities that we talked about as to how we are leading. And therefore, there is a shift in terms of my own identity, which I think we talked about in some other earlier musing. What am I? What do I consider myself? So very crudely I'm putting it as executor. I'm not meaning that, take the word very literally, but what it's simply doing is more like I'm a doer. But now I'm more of a navigator, more of an orchestrator, right? So over the years, many years, I've always been proud that I'm a very strong doer. I'm a thinker, I'm a doer of high quality tasks. I have thought of it as my capability. But now, with all the interesting AI models, I'm asking myself, am I the builder always? Or, because I'm not building everything from scratch, I am co-working with somebody, hopefully, endowed with more intelligence, and therefore I am navigating, I'm orchestrating with it. I'm not producing all the artifacts, maybe even producing lesser artifacts, but I'm having much more meaningful direction. And therefore, maybe my value isn't probably in the speed of my fingers anymore, but probably it is in the wisdom of the wandering that we do. And that's a big shift, because I can't claim anymore that I am the creator, I am the builder. And what does it do to me? It allows me to build, it allows me to craft much faster. And that's probably what rapid possibly means in this new age, right? Simply because if we can kind of explore anything, almost anything, almost instantly, because exploration seemingly is cheap, intelligence seemingly is abundant, execution doesn't seem to be the hardest part. And that's when my question is, I'm still trying to answer. So if how is becoming instant, then what should rapid be? What deserves our precious human attention? And what kind of assurance will help us arrive, not just quickly, but wisely? And this is where I want to leave you with a final thought for the musing. What deserves our attention? So, not to say as a conclusion, because this is a musing, but this is more like rapidity probably is not anymore about the actions that we perform in terms of activities that we do, and therefore we find out how we can optimize the activities and how speedily that we can do alone. It is about the meta aspect of it, the invisible pieces that go along with it, which requires a lot more cognitive effort in variety of different forms, right? And what we are saying is, maybe that is what speed in the context of intelligence may look like, and therefore change the way I perceive of myself and how I work in this probably the braver, newer world. So, thank you.